Hi, I'm Lamar White of the Bayou Brief. Welcome to the Louisiana Democratic Party's Congressional Candidate Forum. We are joined today by Mike McHale, the first Vice Chair of the Louisiana Democratic Party, and Sue Lincoln, also of the Bayou Brief. And we are hosting like I said, the first Congressional District, the seat currently held by Congressman Steve Scalise. The candidates for this race are Tammy Savoy, Leanne Dugas, and Jim Francis. And we are going to, the way this will work is that Mike and Sue will be asking the questions, I will be moderating. Candidates have a time limit. There are strict rules about attacking and answering the questions substantively that I may cut in at some point. They're not answered substantively. We are going to begin with questions about international policy, domestic policy, and then local and state issues. So I guess the very first thing would be candidate intros, and I don't know who won the coin toss or who's going to go first, but
Tammy,
please.
Okay. Hi everybody, my name is Dr. Tammy Savoy, and I am running to serve as your next Congresswoman from Louisiana's 1st Congressional District. I am a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, a licensed clinical psychologist, and a mom. My experience has taught me how to fight for Louisiana. 38 years of public service has taught me that the moment is now for me, and I am called to serve again. There are a myriad of issues that we face today. I have 3 cornerstone issues in my campaign. The first, quality, accessible, affordable health care for everyone. This is a basic human necessity. Second, economic opportunity. We need to invest in our local businesses and attract new businesses to create a path to prosperity for all. And third, national security. We need a leader who will never put party above country. The needs of Louisiana citizens and the citizens of the United States should always come first. The needs of Louisiana should always be put first. I am confident that with your help, your support, we can win. And I urge you to get involved. Go to the website, Tammy Savoy for Congress, and get involved. I'm asking you for your vote. Thank you, and I look forward to serving you and our country again.
Thank you, Dr. Savoy.
Hi, thank you for having the forum. First, my name is Leanne Dugas. I am a disabled Desert Storm veteran, and I am glad to be serving in another way since I can't continue in the military. I also have several years of being an emergency medical technician and private investigator. One of the issues that are the most important is that we have to look at Louisiana. Education is one of the most important things because without education, you can't advance, our state cannot grow, and the country cannot grow. We also need to focus on constitutional oaths, as I would put it. There's duties assigned by the Constitution which Congress is supposed to uphold, and they haven't been done. And I'm a very stickler for the Constitution. Many years ago, I took an oath to protect and defend it, the citizens, and my nation. This is my country, and I'm proud of it. I just never thought that I would have to defend from domestic. Not in my lifetime, anyway. We need to have more action, because the only thing we hear is silence, and silence is just as loud as saying anything. So I want to thank you for having this, and we have to remember, we have to say yes to change, yes to equality, we got to say yes to family, and we have to say yes to Louisiana. It's got to be Louisiana first for our children, our grandchildren, and the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lamar. I'm Jim Francis. I am a person who lives on the North Shore. I live in Covington. I have about 21 years experience doing IT and security work for large corporations. One thing I've always known is how important security is, not only for us, but for our electoral system. I have a family. Security is a major issue for me. I protect it at all costs. I have a 10-year-old son. I feel I have a very unique perspective on what is going on right now. My 10-year-old son is going through school and he is bringing home things that I had no idea he would ever bring home. And I consider that to be a reflection of the environment that we're in right now. This is the exact environment that got me to run in the first place, and I want to make change. The big thing for me is healthcare, need to fix and support the Affordable Care Act in the short term, Medicare for all in the long term. This leads to many, many solutions to a lot of our problems. My other big issue is the economy. I want to help those in industries that are dying to transition with no cost, with training, to new fields. There are jobs that can't be filled right now. And it is my opinion that I can help fill those jobs and give people new opportunity. And my third major point is helping to grow the Democratic Party in Louisiana. Help me do that. I look for your support and I appreciate it. JimFrancisForCongress.com.
Thank you so much. We're going to ask the candidates I think we're having some sound issues. Just move your microphones closer when you answer the questions. And we're going to begin with a round of questions about international policy. I think, Mike, were you going to?
Yeah. And this will go to you first, Ms. Savoy. President Trump has spoken, misspoken, stated, and restated his position on Russian meddling in our elections. Given that 17 intelligence agencies have come to the conclusion that Russia hacked and meddled in the 2016 election, what would you do in Congress to hold Russia and Putin accountable while safeguarding our election process going forward?
Right. One, I would support our intelligence agencies in their reports. I have trust in them, I have faith in them, and we need to support them. Second, the Mueller investigation must go forward. It must be allowed to be completed, and the results of those investigations must be acted upon. We must enforce the sanctions that the Congress has put in place that Trump would like to let slide. And then we must do something to react. So Marco Rubio and Van Hollen, the senators, have proposed a deter law, and they proposed that last week. I support that law, but I think we need to go further. I think that we need to have measures in place to be prepared to retaliate against the Russians when they attack us, because that's what they did. They attacked our country, and they are prepared to continue to attack it. So I believe that we must hold Russia accountable. In order to do that, we need leadership in Congress. We need a representative that is going to hold Trump accountable so that he can do his executive duties to protect the people of the United States. And that includes our infrastructure, our electrical grid, and every aspect of our privacy in social media.
Thank you.
Well, one of the first things that I would do once we get into Congress is that I would have either a House or a joint congressional forum with Congress and issue a joint statement that the Russia meddling cannot go on. We need to sanction them. We need to also roll back and approve the Election Security Act, which the Republicans voted down, that would have provided funding to protect each state election. And without that, it makes it even harder. But we need to protect it. We need that bill. We need that law put in. But the biggest thing is the joint statement, to let them know, to let our president know that you are not above the law. The silence is deadly, and we can't have that. We have come too far and worked too hard to get our relationships on the international level the way they are. So my very first thing would be to get together and get a joint statement of the House and Senate sanctioning Russia for their meddling, and also sanctioning anybody who is involved in it, whether they're Americans or not. They need to be sanctioned. We need to hold them accountable. And that's the first thing we need to do.
Thank you.
And I will do.
Francis, same question.
Same question, absolutely. Having a background in technology and security, I recognize how vulnerable we really are. What we saw in 2016 is Russia doing a hunt and peck technique, which means they're going to calculate what their results were and really imply them this year. And we're going to see the results of that effort, which quite frankly scares the heck out of me. Personally, I don't think sanctions actually work. I think we need to go further. I think we need to actually strip Russia of their presence here in the United States and anywhere else that we can possibly have influence. We are rewarding them by allowing them to have a massive return on such a small investment. And for the fact that our election security office goes unfilled right now, a year and a half after our 2016 elections, seriously concerns me. And it tells me that Republicans are in no way taking this serious. And that really bothers me.
Thank you.
Sue, follow-up or?
I don't have a follow-up on that one. Let me just say, ladies, as a fellow veteran, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
All right. Reports are coming in from across the state of the damaging effects of the Trump tariffs, especially on Louisiana farmers and manufacturing. The Louisiana Association of Business and Industry says they're taking a wait-and-see approach. What would you do as a member of Congress to help Louisiana businesses not be irreparably harmed? Ms. Dugas, you start.
Well, one of the first things that I would do is get Congress, and we roll back the tariffs to where they were before they were initiated by Trump. What they don't realize and what they're not telling you is that these tariffs are going to hurt not just Louisiana. It's going to hurt our farms, our families. It'll make the cost of farm equipment go up. Our oil and gas industry will have to pay twice as much for their equipment. And the biggest thing about the tariffs on that, and a lot of people overlook this, but this will affect the police, the fire, the maritime, our port, and our military, because they'll have to pay more, and it involves their safety equipment. And they need the vest and helmets. They won't have protection if these tariffs remain in effect, and we won't have family farms.
Thank you.
And that's important.
Mr. Francis.
Well, first of all, I would say we need to remove the ability for a president, specifically Trump, to simply impose tariffs using the excuse of national security. Canada imposes no threat to us whatsoever, neither does Mexico. So this is something that we need to take back into the Senate and use regular order. The one thing that I really found out when I met with the New Orleans port officials is how much this is affecting the state of Louisiana. And steel comes in, which is our major delivery throughout the Midwest, and on their return trips, they pick up poultry and perishable goods throughout the country, throughout the Mississippi. Now that the steel has dropped by 50%, all the cost to bring that down to our port throughout the Midwest has nearly doubled. And that cost goes on to every single one of us. I would stop the tariffs, and tariffs may have a place, and a right time and a right place, but it has to go through the proper channels, the proper order. We could not have somebody who simply tweets tariffs and then bails out with $12 billion farmers that he is directly affecting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, Louisiana relies on trade. 1 in 6 jobs in this state is tied to international commerce. 500,000 Louisiana jobs rely on the flow of goods through our ports. So with these tariffs, aluminum shipments through New Orleans ports are a half of what they were a year ago. Soybean exports are down 20%, and chemical and fertilizer exports are down 50%. This is jobs. We have the southern Louisiana port has the largest tonnage of any port in the country, okay? So we're talking about jobs. So what we have to do is go to the Congress and say, Congress needs to take a leadership role in this, and they have not. And our Congress people in particular, because this impacts Louisiana so greatly, the tariffs will impact Louisiana more than any other state in this country. And what have our representatives done to go to Trump and say, no, we're not going to allow this to happen? So we need somebody to fight for Louisiana. Go in there and say, no, these tariffs are not appropriate. We cannot do that, and take leadership back to the Congress where it belongs.
Thank you.
No.
Are we going to move on to domestic
Yeah.
policy? And Mike, this
Sure. Next question. This one goes to you first, Mr. Francis. The GOP plans to balance the $1 trillion budget deficit that they've created by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. What would you do to ensure that the promises we made to seniors and hardworking Americans are kept?
This is incredibly important. I'm glad you asked that. First of all, these are programs that people have paid into their entire lives. We made a promise, we made a commitment that they would have this upon retirement or hitting a certain age. So what I would do is impose a law saying that to this date it's only been Republicans who have been raiding Social Security to fund wars that are, in my opinion, unjustified. We are not following the normal order, which is to go through the Senate and everything else. Right now we're still using laws that were passed after 9/11 to impose Trump's personal whim on who he attacks and where. And what really bothers me is that the Republicans aren't standing up and saying we need to regain this, we need to take back our control and actually fulfill our duties. So really it's a tough question. It's a tough question, and it could have multiple answers. But in my opinion, the Senate needs to finally get back to where they were and perform their duties.
Ms. Savoy?
Okay, so this tax law was fiscally irresponsible, and it was skewed toward the wealthy. The Republicans have abandoned any authority on conservative fiscal policy. It's totally gone. The new tax law will add $1 trillion to the debt. It will also create these deficits for us so that we don't have a budget to cover our Social Security, our Medicaid, our Medicare, all of our social networks that we have, our security networks for our poor people or disenfranchised people. All of those programs are going to be wiped out. So the Republicans, in order to deal with what they did with this tax law, have now proposed a 2019 budget where they cut all of those things. You know, they're going to take $1 trillion out of health care, social services, infrastructure, education. They're going to cut all of those. This is irresponsible, and it doesn't serve the people of this great nation at all. This is totally skewed toward the wealthy. So what we need to do is go and repeal this tax law and basically say, no, we're not going to do this huge corporate tax cut. We may lower that top rate a little bit, maybe not down to what it was, but we'll lower it some, and we are going to reduce the tax cut that the wealthy had, so that we can put money back in our coffers, so that we can invest in our country and invest in Louisiana, because that's who I'm going to go and fight for. That's what we should do.
Thank you. Same question.
Well, I kind of take it as a look at it in a personal aspect. Being a disabled veteran who receives disability from Social Security, Medicare, and the VA, one thing that really scared me was the bill out of the Senate that was passed to privatize the VA, which means that one of our senators made a nice little $3 million for his clinics, and that can't happen. I know what it's like to have to make a decision. You know, a lot of seniors, they have to decide, well, let's see, do I get my medicine or do I get groceries? Nobody should have to decide that, not in America. You know, this was set up in a way to set up a retirement for us. You know, a lot of people can't save, they're not making enough, but this is a retirement for us. We pay into it, it's ours. Democrats and Republicans, you know, we fight to keep it out of their hands, and somehow they go with the sympathy and they try again to take it, you know. So I know what it's like to have that threatened. And we're going to stop it.
Thank you.
I do have a follow-up. We've known this point was coming because the baby boomers are all retiring. We've known that the bigger pull on Social Security and on Medicare was coming. It's a simple mathematical formula. Can you each comment briefly on the lack of future planning for the immediate money going into corporate pockets? Mr. Francis, you started. Let's start with you again.
Sure. A very valid question, and I would want to say that we need to restructure this tax cut. It all comes down to this tax cut. Social Security is well funded for the next 14, 15 years. We've got that. We don't need to set off all the fire alarms and change everything like the Republicans want to. What I would like to do is to see us get a real tax cut for the middle class and make it permanent. The fact that they only followed up after the corporate tax cuts with a temporary middle class tax cut tells me that we were an afterthought. I want to see real tax reform. I want to see corporations paying their share, and we will be funded for quite a while.
Colonel Savoy.
Yes, the issue is with this tax cut, we create so massive deficits so that the way that the Republicans want to fill those massive deficits is by cutting Social Security and dipping into, you know, what's already there so that they basically wipe that out. And we can't do this. We have to maintain that fund. Otherwise, it won't be there as the seniors, as the baby boomers go forward. So we can't raid that fund. That's what the Republicans want to do. And we must look to the future and say we need to plan for this as the baby boomers go through. So we must not raid the fund. We must restructure the taxes and repeal what we have and go back to a sensible tax plan to get coffer money into our coffers.
Ms. Dugas.
Thank you. I do have to agree, this tax cut, it needs to be repealed, reworked, and replaced, because we cannot have corporate tax cuts permanent and middle class. Oh, you get 5 years. No, that is totally backwards. So we need to restructure it, and we need to make sure that these are safe and can't be touched. Maybe set up a penalty. You pull money out of this or use money for this, you can't do it. This and this and this will happen and go down the line.
All right. Next official question. Being healthy leads to better quality of life for all Americans. The Affordable Care Act is far from perfect, but it's under assault right now. It's been under assault from the beginning, primarily by the GOP. What do you see as the best way to provide quality, cost-efficient health care for all Americans? Dr. Savoy?
Yes, I talk about this a lot because it is a cornerstone of my campaign. So first we need to restore the ACA and make sure that all the provisions that it covers or maintain, pre-existing conditions, making sure we have maternal and infant care, making sure we have mental health coverage and pharmacy coverage. We can do all of that by ensuring that the ACA is implemented as the law was passed. Then we also need to take a look at a Medicare program for those who cannot afford the ACA or are not subsidized by the ACA. We need a public option. Medicare for all is one of those so that people can buy into it. I believe we will always have a for-profit industry in the United States of America because the profit motive is strong here. But we must provide a social safety net for those who cannot afford it and work 40 hours a week and can't afford it. We must provide a social service net for everybody to have health care.
Ms. Dugas.
Well, the Affordable Care Act has been around. Many people don't realize this brief thing. It was created by the Heritage Foundation in 1997 as an alternative to Hillary Clinton's health care plan. They have been sitting on it since 1997. Governor Romney used it, converted it, brought in professionals, converted it to a state policy for his state, and it worked great. When President Obama came in, he used some of the sting experts and professionals and expanded it out on a national level. It has some quirks in it, but it can be worked out and made better. If it wasn't for the Affordable Care Act, my mother would have been forced into an inpatient hospice. And that's the last thing that my mother wanted. I took care of her for 8 years. And with the Affordable Care Act, she was able to stay home with her family. And that goes on every day. That's special. So we need to maintain that.
Mr. Francis.
Yes, Leanne, great point. That's a story that I hear quite often. The Affordable Care Act does actually work. What it does is it gets us a little closer to the other nations' health care that we emulate and think we really should have. And why can't we do that here in America? What I really like about the Affordable Care Act is the fact that it supports things that the insurance companies really don't want to cover, and that includes mental health. That is a huge help for helping the gun epidemic in this country. We need to provide that kind of care, and when we identify somebody who is a potential murderer or assault on people who get charged with that, mental health is a key indicator that that person may end up shooting people. And it's not just schools, it is also malls and it's movie theaters and everything else. But the fact that we can cover pre-existing conditions, the very fact that we don't have spending limits, any one of us can wake up with cancer tomorrow. We need the Affordable Care Act.
Just as a quick follow-up to the three of you, one thing that you mentioned was that many elderly Americans have to choose between buying their medicine or buying their groceries. Right. And the cost of prescription medicine has skyrocketed, particularly in this country.
Yes.
What are some specific things that you think can or should be done in this country to make prescription drugs more affordable and available to those who need them?
Well, first of all, sure. We have a law, the Medicaid Authorization Act 2003 or something like that, that basically bans the chief of the Health and Human Services from negotiating pharmacy prices. Okay, so basically they can charge Americans anything they want. However, they negotiate with other countries. So we basically are subsidizing the pharmacy countries, the other countries with our high prices and low prices everywhere else. So we must be able to negotiate with the pharmacy companies. Now they need money and they need incentive to do research. And they have a patent on new drugs coming out. But the idea is that we need to cap their profit. They don't need to make profits on the backs of American lives. So we understand that investment is really important in new drugs. But we also understand that American lives are important and they're at stake, and we need to negotiate for prices and get them lower.
Thanks.
That's very true. I have to agree. We aren't allowed to negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies. It's like it's all catered to the top corporate. We do need the ability to do that. That'll help a lot. The cost of one prescription, give you an example, one of my mom's prescriptions without the insurance and without the Affordable Care Act was $2,500 a month. If we negotiate, we can negotiate that down. But because of the Affordable Care Act and the Medicare Advantage programs, she went from $2,500 and she paid $10.25. That's a big, big deal, because a lot of people they can't afford their medicines. And that inflicts more illness and injury on their families. And it also hastens their death, I hate to say. So we really need to put the people first, and we need to negotiate with the pharmacies.
Mr. Francis?
I think it's well known that the vast majority of the cost of a prescription actually goes into the marketing budgets of the companies who manufacture these drugs. It's not research. And if we wanted to have a simple solution that would really solve our issues, is open our borders up to drugs where we can order far, with 10% the cost from Mexico, from Canada, the exact same drugs that are manufactured on the same assembly lines as the pills or fluids that are sold here in America. Medicaid, if we expand Medicaid and give that to everybody, all of a sudden Medicaid, who is authorized to actually negotiate these wonderfully low drug prices, could be applied to everybody. And that is actually the key to bringing all of our prescription costs down.
I have a really quick follow-up, and this could be a very short answer, but there's been some, I think that it's important to have a discussion about the differences between the public option and Medicare for all. Dr. Savoy, you talked about the need that the private sector will always exist.
Yeah.
I was hoping that the three of you would mind expanding on whether or not you believe in Medicare for all, or more of a hybrid model that we have under the Affordable Care Act, where there's still a private sector. What does universal health care mean, I guess is what I'm asking.
Well, for me, universal health care means that everybody has access to affordable, quality health care. Now, we have a profit motive in this country that's beyond belief, and the medical industrial complex feeds off of that profit complex. So what we really need to do is have a portion of our medical care not be motivated by profit. And so as long as we have rich people in the country, which we will always have and people strive to be, then we're going to be able to pay for, those people are going to be able to pay for health care, and there will be providers who go after those dollars. But we need a good, solid health care program for those people who can't pay, top dollar for everything. And we can do that by providing a public option or Medicare, somebody can buy into Medicare, in addition to good, solid insurance programs. So a hybrid for the United States, I think, is best.
Thank you.
That's a question that's been asked, a lot, being disabled and stuff. It's Medicaid for all, and the Medicaid expansion is an excellent idea. I think everybody, that is the easiest way to say it. Healthcare is a right. It's a right. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, healthy. So, it's a right.
Do you see this as a government incentive then, or that the right is, so Dr. Savoy said the right is access to health care, which I would agree with. So do you think it's could also expand to like a government program that's available and free of charge for every American?
Yeah, I think in some parts, yes, it should be, because I look at it as a right. Just like the Constitution, we have, those are our rights. It should be a right. Because with a healthy country, we can't.
I'd like the opportunity to answer.
Sure, go ahead. Before
you asked about,
I'll get back to you.
You asked about universal health care, and I wanted to say that we're already almost there. All we need to expand Medicare from the current age that you qualify for now to be a part of Medicare, and drop it down to moment of conception or moment of birth, and you will have total coverage from day one. And you will also benefit from that. You will also benefit from the lower cost and everything else. So to me, it starts the moment you're born or conceived. And to me, it is Medicare enhanced. Medicare gets us a long way there, and it could actually deliver for us and be comparable to countries who are extremely advanced with healthcare, such as France, Germany. And their quality of care is far higher than ours is. If you look at when healthcare companies began to be profitable in this country, there's a slot, there's an angle, you see a graph, and all of a sudden the rest of the world keeps getting better and better. And right in 1978, America takes a horizontal turn, hasn't changed. We have not gotten better healthcare due to profitable insurance companies. So my tack would be, let's make Medicare for all.
And I mentioned you, so you would have follow-up clarification or comment.
Yeah, I think that medical care is a responsibility. Okay, it's a basic human necessity, and so we have a individual and government responsibility to make sure that everybody has access to quality, affordable health care. So everybody has skin in the game, and everybody has to participate. I think we are far from getting, people are not getting the health care they need now, and we need to expand it with a Medicare program for all.
Okay, all right. Our next question, we'll go to you first, Ms. Dugas. The Internet has become a vital resource for conducting business and a critical part of our everyday lives. With the new net neutrality rules by the FCC, Please describe your position on net neutrality and what exactly you plan to do as a member of Congress to preserve the Internet as we now know it.
Well, I was very disappointed to see when they attacked and been attacking the net neutrality for the last 7-8 years. This is the way a lot of people communicate, do their business. I guess the easiest way, it's part of the First Amendment, and it should not be restricted. You know, it shouldn't be just these people and those people should have it. Everybody should be able to have the internet, because it's, I can't find the word to describe it. We have to have, it has to be neutral, it has to be not regulated as much as it is, but we need security in our internet. If anything, 2016 showed us that. We need to add more, go back to the net neutrality, and we need to double the security. From the companies, need to add protections.
Mr. Francis?
Net neutrality, to me, is all about fairness. We as taxpayers and through the government developed the World Wide Web. This is a platform that we created, that corporations came in and basically hijacked and said, well, we can start making a lot of money off of this and charging people. That really concerns me. The fact that, you know, we repealed, well, we didn't, but the Republicans repealed net neutrality, and they said, no, you're not going to see any increases in rates. You're not going to have to pay more to access certain websites or high-definition video streams. We already see it. Charter's already announced. AT&T has already announced that they are doing this. And they're doing what we feared, which is selling our browser histories. We don't have the privacy that we had pre-net neutrality. So that is a big concern of mine, and I would restore that, and I would strengthen it. I wouldn't have it be an FCC policy. I'd have it be an actual law, because we all rely on it much more now than we ever have in the past. And if we want to have protections as Americans, we absolutely need to restore this and allow corporations to all play fair.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. We need to go to Congress and restore net neutrality for everybody, because it's unfair practices. So a company can really slow down the internet, your internet browsing to sites that you really like to go to, and push you to sites that they want, that they favor, and that they're making a profit off of. So basically, they can jack up the prices for another company, and so basically they have kind of a monopoly over this, and it's not fair, and it's going to cost us a lot, and we will see this gradually over time. We will see the cost. So what we really need to do is show some leadership in Congress to go there and say, you know what, we're going to protect the people of this country, because we all rely on the internet now for our commerce in so many different ways. So the bottom line is, go show some leadership, stand up for the people of the United States and Louisiana, and that's what I will do if I get to go to Congress.
Thank you.
Just as a quick follow-up, so I just want some clarification. Do the three of you think that the internet should be considered a public utility, like water or gasoline or gas, or you know, it's a public utility in Lafayette, for example? Just yes or no, or just a quick answer whether or not.
I agree with that, and I'm also very impressed by local organizations or cities or communities developing their own internet access, bypassing this corporate ownership. And I'd like to see more of that.
I would definitely agree, and that way, you know, some kids, if you don't have internet, you know, you are just lost. If you don't have it and you're going to school and you have to go to the library after school and to get access in the middle of the night, you can't work. So if we made it a public utility, it kind of evens the playing field for so many businesses, so many kids in school. So this would be a positive thing.
I agree. It should be a public utility.
All right. Our democracy is based on representation, where the people choose who represents them, not the politicians picking who they want to represent. How do you think our government should address the issue of gerrymandering? And that means plotting and drawing graphs for districts that give them a better chance of being reelected. How can we ensure fair representation for the 2020 elections when we won't have done the census yet? We'll just be completing it, and beyond. What needs to happen with the Supreme Court and some of the gerrymandering cases that are going on right now?
If at all possible, I would propose a bipartisan commission to decide the lines. And what I mean is that governors have demonstrated over the last nearly 20 years that they're willing to gerrymander, they're willing to deny the rights of the voters who live in those communities. They're willing to draw star-shaped districts that in no way represent an equal
Time
way.
for a minute. It's not the governors that decide, it's legislatures.
That is true, but the governor does eventually sign off. And my biggest concern is that now that it's a state-by-state issue, why don't we allow a nonpartisan issue come before as a bill in Congress and allow either party to argue their case on any state, any line that's drawn? Because what I don't want to see, which is what's happening now, is people are starting to feel their votes really don't matter. An even 50-50 split in the state could produce 6 Republican elected officials and 3 Democrats. It's not an even playing field. And I don't want people to lose their confidence in our democracy.
All right.
Okay, so I have a plan, okay? So in 2018, we're going to elect new representatives to Congress to fight, okay? That's the first thing. 2019, we're going to re-elect in Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards as our governor. 2019, a number of our incumbent state legislatures will be termed out. Democrats need to run a candidate in each empty seat. We also need to run against every incumbent Republican, and we need to give Governor Edwards some hope and some help when we go to redistricting. In 2020, we need to turn out for the census. This is extremely important that Democrats show up. This administration is trying to do everything they can to intimidate people not to go and fill out the census. Then, in 2021, when we redistrict, okay, we should, if we have a legislature, we should ask them to do a bipartisan commission, because it is the legislature who decides the districting. But they can pass a law that says, or pass an injunction that says, we're going to have a bipartisan commission. And we can do that. They can also put it on the ballot to let the people decide, and they should do that too. We have a plan, let's get to it, let's stick to it, and flip the state legislature as well.
Ms. Dugas.
One of the first things that I would do is that I would take it out of the hands of our state legislature, out of the hands of the governor. I would have a bill put up in Congress to have a law that we have the Department of Justice. They will vet, or the Attorney General, they will vet an independent group that will handle the redistricting. Because if we take it out of the hands of the state legislature, we have an independent, don't have skin in the state, an independent body that can look at it and actually divide the districts the way they should be, with the actual census, and not, okay, well, we can just slip maybe a couple thousand over here and over there. And a perfect example is our district. It's divided across 8 parishes. You know, that's just, you know, but we need to go with an independent, vetted group to handle that, starting with a bill from Congress. And that's what one of the things that I will work on.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, next question. I believe this one will go to you first, Dr. Savoy. With the resignation of Scott Pruitt and the interim head of the Environmental Protection Agency being a coal lobbyist, what do you envision as the role of the EPA in protecting the environment and in regulating business?
The role of the EPA is extremely important, okay? And they need to regulate the environment, and they need to protect the environment for us and for our kids. So I think that you know, there is a false dichotomy between protecting the environment and jobs. We can do both, and we must do both. Here in Louisiana, I support the governor's coastal master plan, and this is a plan that is a 50-year, $50 billion plan to protect our coastal erosion. And it has 124 projects, but they're not all funded. So what we need to do is have representation in Congress to go and protect us and fight for funding for our coastal erosion, and go forward with the EPA to have public, private, industry, and citizen coordination in protecting our environment and our land and our air and our water.
One of the first things that I would do in Congress is that I would get a resolution together, and what we would do is that we would reinstate the many regulations that have already been taken away and thrown away. I mean, do we want to be in a place where we have to wear a mask to go out, just to go to our car, or our kids go to school? Air and water and alternative energy are very important, especially health-wise. And what we need to do is that we need to review other regulations. We need to make some even stronger, I guess, but we need to restore the regulations that they have just destroyed and torn up. And that has to be done by Congress to make it happen.
Francis.
Well, I would have to think of, why was the EPA created in the first place? We saw catastrophic environmental damage done in the 70s due to corporations, manufacturers who are taking advantage of our environment, and they are reducing costs by dumping poisonous runoff from their manufacturing processes. They save money by not having to dispose of that properly. And what we're seeing under the Trump administration right now is a return to that belief that companies can do it to save $1 while it goes right into our streams and everything else. So I would suggest expanding the EPA with people who will actually enforce the laws and regulations that are on hand. Expand that, because new chemicals and things are created daily. And we need to have a system in place to ensure that our kids, grandkids, do not have to avoid specific areas because they're so polluted with toxic chemicals. And that is what I'm afraid of under Trump, is that we're getting back to that loose regulation that caused the EPA to exist in the first place.
Let me ask a follow-up. Should nature and the natural environment, the river, the land, the trees, the forests, have a right to exist tantamount to the corporate rights? Should nature be owned, or should it be considered an individual with rights?
The environment, nature should be protected. This is our home, okay? And for us, what we do in the next 2 decades will determine if our home, especially the coastal parishes here, will exist or not. And so, yes, we need to protect these, and they have a right just as much as the corporations that come in and destroy them and ravage them. Well, we have a right and we have a responsibility to take care of those lands and our environment and the nature, so that, you know, it exists for prosperity. And we must do that. It is our responsibility. We cannot abdicate that responsibility. And we're running out of time.
Mr. Gunn.
Nature does have a right to exist, because without nature we would not have air to breathe, we would not have fresh, clear streams. And I was disappointed that they rolled back the national monuments. That is one of the things that I feel strongly about. We're taking away land that's not ours. It's there. It's for all of us. And that's one of the first things that I would do. Is restore the monuments and restore the forests, because they do have a right to exist. They give us life.
I gotta say, I love how you put that as the environment as a human, as a person with the same rights. You know, Citizens United said the corporations are humans with the same rights. So of course, and not only do we need to do that and designate them as on par and with the same level, we have to basically declare everything as a natural resource, has to be protected. Corporations now are eating up as much as they possibly want without any consideration for future. Now, of course, some people who log, replant trees, you know, but these people who dump oil into soil, they can't regrow soil. They can't do any of that. So if we allow them to take advantage of it now, there's really no getting back to that pristine land that we once had. So I love your idea. I think that's great.
It's not my idea. It's a movement that's out there that I've come across. Oh, thank you so much.
I just want to make sure, how are we doing on time? Okay. We're probably going to skip a couple questions and we're going to move over to local and state issues.
67 cents on the dollar compared to their male counterparts. Women of color make less than 49 cents on the dollar compared to males. With the legislature's inability to pass equal pay legislation that protects everyone, not just state workers, what would you do on a federal level to ensure that Louisiana women get equal pay for equal work?
Well, a little bit of information that many people don't know. The Equal Rights Amendment was in Congress since anything that says it all. You know, we do the same thing as, I give you in the Navy, I was in the Seabees, one of the first females. I did everything that the men did, and I was the only female in a couple of hundred guys. So I did it myself without their help. And they like to offer, well, no, I did it myself. We can do everything that they can. And it should be equal. And that Equal Rights Amendment, it's time to get it out of Congress and have somebody sign it.
It is out of Congress. It's one state away from ratification. Congress just has to reopen the qualifying for it and allow the previous votes be counted and get one more state.
Well, let's do it.
One more.
I'll do it.
All right.
Well, I support exactly as you just described. But you know, there's equal pay, but this really ties into a much larger issue, and it's the constant attack on women. And it is an overall unfairness that happens. It's gender discrimination. There's less upward mobility. There's less potential. We praise whenever we think somebody breaks through a glass ceiling. Why are we still talking about women breaking through a glass? That's absurd. There are women who could do far better than I can at many, many things. And so it's absurd that we have to cater to this belief throughout our country that women don't need paid as much. And it's absurd. I mean, in many, many ways. I mean, look at the woman who designed our first shuttle. You know, our first launch to the moon. I mean, she was a mathematician who could do what nobody else could. Why are we still stuck back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s? It's driving me insane. It's a great topic. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, I think at the federal level, the one thing that we can do, women are more likely to make the minimum wage. They are more likely to have a wage that's not a livable wage, that they can't. So the one thing we can do on the federal level is raise the minimum wage. So right now it's $7.25. Louisiana has no state minimum wage. We go with the federal minimum wage. So the thing that we can do to lift women out of poverty and to reduce that pay gap is to lift the minimum rate, raise the minimum wage. We have a representative right now who voted against raising the minimum wage, both in 2014 and 2017. Steve Scalise voted against the minimum wage increase. This was devastating to Louisiana women. And so he is indifferent to the women's needs. And I think we need to have some leadership in Congress that is going to go in and look for practical ways to say, okay, we can raise the minimum wage, we can reduce pay transparency, we can have the Fair Paycheck Act. So there are many very specific things we can do to help women, specifically in Louisiana. And I'm going to fight for Louisiana women.
As a follow-up question, the tipped wage has been static at $2.13 an hour since 1995. At that time, it was half of minimum wage, $5.25 an hour. Should something be done to address the tipped wage? Should we eradicate it completely and make it minimum wage plus tips, which is what it was many years ago?
It's got to be minimum wage plus tips. It has to be. We have to have a living wage, 15 or more. You know, if we would have kept up with the growth in our country, the minimum wage would be $25.15 right now. That would be minimum wage, starting out pay. But we haven't. It's been stifled. But a waitress, bartenders, anybody that works in hospitality, that's hard work. 75-pound trays, you know, late hours, 4 in the morning.
Yep.
I've done it. But
Me too.
So I know. You know, it needs to be minimum wage plus tips. Clean, simple.
I agree entirely. It's another way of corporations taking advantage of workers, and the fact that that tip wage is never raised at all over all those years should say that. You know, if you go to France, you try to tip somebody, a server, and they will give it back to you. They don't even understand what you're doing. We are a tip society, and we've been led to do that so that we can keep the wages extremely low. So you're playing poker each night with your job. Do I bring home $20 tonight, or do I bring home $110? How can you base a living on that? There's no confidence. There's no security in that. Minimum wage plus tips.
I have a little more nuanced response to that, because for waitresses or servers that work in lower end restaurants, Waffle House, Shoney's, or things like that, definitely minimum wage but plus tips. There are some high-end restaurants where people make really good money on tips in this country, okay? And they do so, and they don't really want the minimum wage, because if they get minimum wage, then those tips are likely to go down. So there is a battle within the industry, basically. So I would take a more nuanced approach and say, for a certain level of restaurants where the food prices are this high, you know, then yes, minimum wage and tips. But for high upscale restaurants where the tips will really, you can make a livable wage off of the tips, and the servers do not want a minimum wage because that would actually lower their pay, then we need to do something for them as well. So I would have a more nuanced approach and a more structured approach, and I would get the industry involved, because they're the ones who will be affected, and we need to have their say and have their input into how we structure a wage like that.
Thank you. I know we're probably running up on time, and the next few questions, I think we've covered a lot of this stuff, healthcare and the environment, and minimum wage, actually, was one of the questions that we had. So, Mike, I don't know if, you know.
Yeah, actually, I think I have a question that I'd like to ask that I don't think we've covered yet. With the failures of the Veterans Administration, the increase in homeless veterans and the increase in the suicide rate for veterans has skyrocketed. How do you envision the VA providing adequate and expedient care for those who've sacrificed so much for this country?
Absolutely. The VA has existed for quite a while, but I believe they're still stuck in the 80s. One thing I would propose is opening up the VA, allow them to go outside of that single building designated for veterans. Allow them to go to local doctors that they choose. It's really a Medicare expansion is what we're talking about. Allow them to get the services they need where they want them. And what I would say is that individual mandate, but also the mental health coverage of the Affordable Care Act would contribute considerably to our homelessness issue, which is majority veterans. And to really address that, you need to have a new approach. I'm considering a 21st century approach, and that's allow them to come in. They can be subsidized however you want, but really they need to be able to, you know, go to their local doctor. Some VAs are 20, 30 miles away. Why limit that? Spread it out across a spectrum that can absorb the cost and the number of people, reduce the wait times, increase the quality of care. That's what I would propose.
Okay, so let's talk about the the VA a little bit. It is the largest healthcare system, and I know about the VA. I've worked for the VA, and I am a veteran, and I use the Veterans Administration, and it is a great system. It is the largest healthcare system in the United States. 300,000 employees, more than 9 million veterans, and 1,240 facilities. So to say that that when we have one or two clinics that don't perform, to say that the whole system is broken is false. In actuality, the outcomes, the medical outcomes in the VAs are actually better than our public health care outcomes. The suicide rate for veterans is a very complicated picture. We have veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf War, all the way to our current veterans. So when we have a rise in suicide rate in the oldest people, our oldest veterans, that doesn't mean we have a problem with veterans. That means we have something that, the suicide rate in our older veterans, just like the greatest generation, this is their last, I'm taking things into my own hands, and I am going to take my life the way I want to. So it's not that the Veterans Administration is not working. The Veterans Administration does a great service, and we need to maintain it. We need to make sure that our veterans have a place to go that is specifically for them. If they can't get care in a certain amount of time or within a certain distance, then we can provide an alternative for them. But we do not want to dismantle the Veterans Health Administration. This is a very important benefit for all of the health care needs of the veterans, and these are very specific, and it's very heartwarming for veterans to be able to go to a place where they know their specific needs will be taken care of. I support the Veterans Administration 100%. I will always support the Veterans Administration.
Well, being a disabled veteran myself, we already can go to outside physicians. One of the things why I do not go to the VA is the fact that it starts with the administration, and it starts with your cases on what the veteran has and what are they diagnosed with and whether they can go or not. A lot of people don't realize this, but the VA is not free. Unless you are service connected, then it's free. If you are not service connected, then you pay on a sliding scale according to how much disability you get. Another thing is outpatient. There's not a lot of outpatient clinics, especially for mental health, that offer complete services. In my situation, going to the VA, it took me 13 months to get an appointment. And by then, I went to my private physician and got everything. The medications are not available for me through the VA unless I am an inpatient at the VA. So that leaves me having to go back to the outside. So we can already do that. And a lot of veterans, they can't afford the sliding scale. The veterans say, everybody says, well, the veterans, free health care, free. No, it's not free. If you're service connected, it is. If you're not, then you pay on a sliding scale. It needs to change.
Last one.
And I think that we're going to skip to the last question, then after that we'll have closing statements. Sue will deliver the last question.
Y'all have been very, very patient and very expansive in your answers. And before we get to where I can't do this, I want to say thank you. One of the most common grievances with metro areas in this state, particularly here in Baton Rouge, I know also in New Orleans, out in Lake Charles, is traffic and the dilapidated infrastructure, the highways and roads, bridges. It's not uncommon across the entire country. What would you do as a congressperson to craft a nationwide infrastructure plan that will both rebuild America's workforce, but also
to sit in a college every day and go to college and sit in a classroom. I would say bring back the technical schools. Train people.
Good question. And I got to say, from what I've seen over the last year and a half of the Trump administration, they are looking at infrastructure rebuilding as a massive potential money grab by corporations. Privatizing rebuilding of roads and bridges and having us pay tolls every few miles, that's not the answer. What I would propose is our infrastructure is national security. And when you fall under that category, it opens up a whole new breadth of funding that is possible. For example, I live in Covington, and I have got roads that have not been expanded in 20 years, and after Katrina, our population doubled. We've got hurricane evacuation routes that you cannot even cross at 5 o'clock at night, you know? So we've got immediate local needs. We've, of course, got large national needs, and I think that's an example of one need that goes ignored because it does take money. But we need to declare it as a national security item, and that opens up the funding for us to do that.
It's a good idea.
I hate to do this, but we had an audio issue with the last, with both of your responses, so if you wouldn't mind, no, we caught yours.
Oh, good.
If you wouldn't mind repeating your response.
No problem. Okay.
You want me to re-ask the question?
Yeah,
Repeat the
re-ask the
question.
question because
All right.
you know I'm moving on.
One of the most common grievances in metro areas in the state is traffic and the dilapidated infrastructure. It's not uncommon across the country. What would you do as a congressperson to craft a nationwide infrastructure plan that will both rebuild the workforce and bring the infrastructure into the 21st century?
Yeah. So, like I said, Trump was promised that he would do this, and he has not. And the Republicans, of course, have not held him accountable. And then they passed the tax law, which depleted our funds to invest in our infrastructure, and now they want to cut more. So what we need to do is restructure the tax code again so that we can replenish our coffers for everything, because we're broke right now. We're going to have another $1 trillion in debt. Our deficits are out of control. So we need money in the coffers. But then we can create, like I said, when Eisenhower created the interstate system in this country, it had an enormous impact on interstate commerce, and that's what we need to do. So we need another interstate works that concentrates on not just interstate roads but also local roads, local infrastructure, so that we can improve business. And we can do that, you know, with a restructuring, and that will help. That will help with jobs, and that will help with commerce as well, and it will improve the situation in the country.
Well, one of the things is that, like I said before, is that we need to go with, well, the restructuring the tax plan will help a lot. But what we need to do is that we need to restore funding. Every year, they take more and more and more and more out of it. It's one of their favorite things to cut. We have not had a balanced budget. That would be a good place to start, because we can add the infrastructure back into it and restore it. We can also have job fairs. We can also bring back the vocational technical schools. Not everybody, like I said, is cut out to sit in a college for 4 years. They like to work with their hands. I work with my hands. I love working. A lot of people do. And I learn more, and a lot of people learn more with hands-on. That's how we increase our workforce, by giving them hands-on training.
Thank you so much. I think now we're at the time of closing arguments, or closing statements, if you will. Thanks so much to all three of you. This has been a really informative, and thank you for being generous with your time. I'm sure that the audience has enjoyed it as well. Are we going in the same order?
No.
Reverse order. So you're up.
Gentlemen before ladies.
I know, that doesn't feel right, does it? But okay, it is what it is. So I will say, in my closing arguments, why you should vote for me. And I want to tell you, first of all, I want to support the Affordable Care Act immediately. The requirement for people to have health insurance and be responsible for their own care is incredible. We are paying for other people who are doing things that lead to massive problems with healthcare, with their own lives. They're ignoring issues. They're not getting care. I don't think we should all have to pay for that. The other big thing that I would say is that we need to build the Democratic Party. I've been working with the 4 major universities, and I have been building a large database of millennials, and millennials do vote. The most recent study shows that 64% are dying to get out to vote. And I have been working with them to bring them in. So a vote for me brings not only Democrats in, but brings in the next generation of Democrats. And that is a major concern. No matter what happens, we should have a larger Democratic Party, at least for the next 10 years, because of that. So I need your support to do that. Thank you.
Well, we've had a lot of, I enjoyed the forum, and I'm glad that y'all did it. One of the things that we have to remember is that we have to be willing to change. Change is good, some is bad, but we need a positive change statewide first and nation. And a lot of the problems in our state can only be corrected by being in Congress and working a law and improving the way Congress operates. One of the things is that we can't be afraid. Don't be afraid to get out and vote for newcomers. You know, the purpose of the House of Representatives and the way it was structured the way it is every 2 years is to keep fresh ideas and new people coming in to help grow the economy, to grow the nation, and the diversity. And that is very important. And I can only ask that you support me. And we just got to remember 5 simple things. And that's yes to change, yes to equality, yes to family, yes to Louisiana. Because that has to be first. Our kids and grandkids' future, our future depends on it. This is the most important election we'll ever vote in our lifetime. And I hope that we got to do it. This is the year that we have to do it. Think about your kids and grandkids. Let's do the future for them. Thank you.
We do. Thank you, Leanne. And thank you, Jim. Thanks to everybody. Let me reintroduce myself. My name is Tammy Savoy, and I am running to serve as your next Congresswoman from Louisiana's 1st Congressional District. I am a retired Air Force Lieutenant Colonel, a licensed clinical psychologist, and a mom. And my experience has taught me how to fight for Louisiana. My experience has brought me to this moment now, and I am ready to serve again. There are 3 issues that make up the cornerstone of my campaign. That is health care for everybody. This is a basic human necessity. Economic opportunity for all. We must invest in our businesses, and we must attract new business. And national security. We should not have a congressperson who puts party over country. We must have a congressperson that always puts the rights of Louisiana, the issues, the needs of Louisiana first. And I want to be that congressperson for you. I will fight for you in Congress. Join the conversation. Go to my webpage, Tammy for Congress, Tammy Savoy for Congress. I am asking you for your vote. I will fight for you, and thank you. I look forward to serving you and our country again. Have a good evening.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining us, and appreciate the Louisiana Democratic Party for hosting Lamar White of the Bayou Brief. We're signing off. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Three. Hi, I'm Lamar White with the Bayou Brief, and I'm here to host and moderate a congressional forum with the two Democratic candidates for the 6th Congressional District that's currently held by Congressman Garrett Graves. We're joined today by Justin DeWitt and Andy Cezanne. We will be asking a series of questions, international foreign policy questions, domestic policy questions, and then we're going to hone down on some local and state issues at the end. I'm also joined by Michael McHale. He's the first vice chair of the Louisiana Democratic Party, and by Sue Lincoln, who is also a writer for the Bayou Brief. We did a coin toss before. Andy, you are going to lead us off, so without further ado.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank everyone, thank the Democratic Party for holding this and having us here. And Lamar, thank you for being the moderator. I'm Andy Cezanne. I'm running for Congress here in the 6th District. I'm a wife, I'm a mother, and I'm a software engineer. I've been doing advocacy work here in this district for quite some time. I have 4 children. I put myself through college as a single mother, built my career here in this district, and I'm running for Congress because we need representation, and I'm fighting to protect families and workers here in this district.
Thanks. Justin?
My name is Justin DeWitt. I'm running for Congress in the Louisiana 6th District. I'd like to thank everyone for being here today and hosting, the Democratic Party for hosting, as well as thank you for tuning in today to see about where we stand on our issues. I graduated from Zachary High School, and I worked 40 hours a week during high school, and I also live in the 6th District in the heart of Baton Rouge. I'm running for Congress because I've always paid attention to politics. Being an openly gay man in the South, it's been a target of a lot of legislation. So I've always followed politics, never got involved until I flooded in the 2016 floods. And when I sat there in my mucked out house, me and my husband, and I thought to myself, it's time to do something, because I'm not running to give you the political statement that I had an epiphany or anything like that. I'm running because I'm angry and the job's not getting done, and it's time to fire these representatives and replace them with other people. I don't believe the people of Louisiana need to be represented by sellout corporate politicians. I'm not a sellout corporate politician. I'm an average person that has over a decade of experience in infrastructure in this district, from flood walls after Hurricane Katrina and highways all across this state. I will represent the people of Louisiana because I'm just another average person from Louisiana. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. We're going to start with some foreign policy questions. Mike?
Sure. President Trump has spoken, misspoken, stated, and restated his position on Russian meddling in our elections. Given that 17 intelligence agencies have come to the conclusion that Russia hacked and meddled in the 2016 election, what would you do in Congress to hold Russia and Putin accountable while safeguarding our elections going forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Is that for me?
Yes, to you
Yeah.
first.
I think that it's evident that Russia has meddled in our election, and that we need to trust our own intelligence agency over a foreign enemy. I think it's a catastrophe that our president is siding with a foreign enemy over our own intelligence agency. I think it's treasonous, and I think that we need to protect Mueller and his investigation. I think that Congress needs to definitely fight to protect that investigation from being interfered with.
First of all, Congress needs to censure the president for what he said in Helsinki. That is not the position of the United States. The United States' position is Russia meddled in our election. It will not be tolerated. Not only do we need to implement sanctions against the Russians for this involvement in our elections, we need to continue to put more economic strain on them as well. And as well as the Mueller investigation goes, Congress needs to not attempt to impeach Mueller. Needs to not impeach Rosenstein and interfere with this investigation. It's already shown there's indictments, so there's obviously wrongdoing. Whether it's in the initial, if there's no collusion, doesn't matter. There's crimes been committed, and this investigation's already uncovering these crimes. So why would you impede it? Why would you stop? There's no point. Unless you're hiding or whatever the reason they were doing that, they're not doing it for the right reason.
Thanks.
All right, next question. Reports are coming in from across the state of the damaging effects of the Trump tariffs, especially toward Louisiana farmers and manufacturing. The Louisiana Association of Business and Industry says they're taking a wait-and-see approach. What would you do as a member of Congress to help Louisiana businesses not be irreparably harmed? Justin, to you first.
As a member of Congress, I would propose and support legislation to make all tariffs that the president would sign in have to get congressional approval within 60 days. I'd propose it. I'd support the legislation as well. Also, the tariffs that are imposed right now or suggested right now, those are off-the-cuff moments where they affect the economy greater than most people understand, and I don't support them. And I would advocate in Congress, and I would open my mouth every single day and make sure that everyone else knew it, that ain't the right way to go, and we need to reverse that.
Miss Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. There's already been legislation that's been introduced to do just that, and that is to get approval through Congress in order to impose those tariffs. There's also legislation introduced by the Senate that would even make it proactive from where he started doing that and go back. Now, I think it's very important that we address this issue here in Louisiana because it affects our economy the most. I've talked to business owners, a gentleman that has a fencing company. It affects his business, and that's out in Denham Springs. He said the prices of metal fences has gone up, and that makes an astronomical impact on his business. We also have farmers, soy farmers here in Louisiana, and we need to protect them. So our congressional representation needs to be standing up for what's best in Louisiana. Absolutely.
Very good.
Thank you. We're going to move on to some domestic questions, unless you had a follow-up.
No.
No, I'm
So,
good.
Mike?
All right, and this one will go to you first. The GOP plans to balance the $1 trillion budget deficit that they've created by cutting Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. What would you do to ensure that the promises we made to seniors and hardworking Americans are kept?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, that is an agreement the government has made with us. And they often call it a benefit. But this is something that many Americans pay into their whole life. And it is the government's responsibility to ensure that we get that. It is more of an entitlement that we get that assurance that we get protected in our retirement. As far as how we are able to protect it, there's multiple ways that we can do that. There's plenty of money that we can get back through repealing the legislation that prevents us from negotiating prescription drugs with Medicare and Medicaid. That would save us $25 billion a year in taxes. I think it's important for us to repeal that legislation. Also, I think that it's important to protect our seniors. We have a moral responsibility to protect our seniors.
Thank you.
First of all, we wouldn't necessarily be in this situation if sellout congressmen and sellout congressional representatives like Garrett Graves wouldn't have broke his promise in December to raise the deficit. And now they want to say we have a problem. We need to cut some things. That's your typical politician selling you out. I would propose in Congress to take back that tax break, and then that right there will solve a lot of the debt problem we have. And as well as I would vote never to cut Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, none of these programs that were promised to the American people, because those promises should not be broken. When the federal government betrays you, it takes you a long time to either get over it or to come to terms with that. You're supposed to protect and help us as a government. Breaking your promise is not the way to go.
And I think Sue has a question about the Affordable Care Act.
That's right. Being healthy leads to better quality of life for all Americans. The Affordable Care Act is far from perfect, but it's under assault right now by the GOP and has been for quite some time. What do you see as the best way to provide quality, cost-efficient health care for all Americans, and should it be for all Americans?
Do I support the single-payer system is a question I get asked about this a lot. I do. I'm sorry, Medicare for all. Sorry. But there's a way to get there. There's 434 other members of Congress, and I'm not going to lie and be a political statement and say day one we can get that done. That's the goal, is to get to that program. And in the time being, we can implement a program that I support, which is the Medicare buy-in system, which allows people of the lower income, based off of their income, they would have a premium, and that premium is tied to their income. So therefore, by definition, that's affordable. The lowest of income would have the lowest of premiums. That would also give us a lot of bargaining rights, or not bargaining rights, a lot of control to regulate the prices of drugs, because then the government would be one of the largest buyers of medical supplies and prescriptions.
Ms. Andy?
Hi. The biggest thing about the AC that we need to protect is the Medicaid expansion. I think that we need to ensure that that helps our state immensely. One of the biggest problems I see with the ACA is that we give taxpayer dollars to for-profit insurance industries that profit gambling against the health of Americans. What I support that we do is the Medicare for all. But what most people don't understand is that much of the bills that are introduced are making this an option for Americans to buy into. What this allows us to do is use our capitalist market, number one, by giving Americans a public option to buy into the Medicare program, a popular program that people love and support. It gives them a public option. Also, it gives Americans the option to have private insurance if they do choose so. I think if you take the regulations off of the private insurance companies, as long as you provide the public option, you're going to stabilize the insurance market by providing competition in our capitalist market.
Just as a quick follow-up, and Justin, you referred to this a little bit, the prescription drug prices, there's an awful lot of people in this country who monthly have to choose between buying the medicine that they need to survive, or buying the groceries that they need, or keeping the electricity on. Certainly what you said is overall position as far as getting to health care for all. But in the meantime, what are some specific things that you think that Congress could do to help lower drug prices to help out individuals?
Congress could pass legislation to allow the flow of medications from other countries, other sources, that would lower prices. But that would be the easy fix, and that would be something that could get done if your sellout politicians would actually do something about it. But they don't want to. They love running on that issue. They love using issues. They don't want to fix problems. If they did, they wouldn't listen to their corporate backers. They would fix the problem. Me personally, after paying about $1,100 a month for medical insurance for me and my husband, I still have to fork out $30 every time I go to the doctor. My husband has to go to the doctor every month. I have to fork out money for co-pays. One of his prescriptions costs over $400 without insurance. How are you supposed to pay for that if you don't work? If you're trying to get a worker, you make minimum wage. How are you supposed to pay for that if you can't get insurance because you get messed over by your employer and you get part-time intentionally so they can dodge taxes? It's all about your corporate sellouts. Congress could pass legislation yesterday if they want it.
Andy?
Yeah, I think when you talk about prescription drugs for Medicare and Medicaid explicitly, we have to realize that Billy Tozan is the man that championed the legislation that prevents us from negotiating the price of prescription drugs. And our current congressman worked for him when he did that. Then Billy Tozan retired to go work for Big Pharma. Now, again, this costs us billions of dollars a year. Number one, we could repeal this legislation and be able to negotiate the price of prescription drugs for these programs, save billions of dollars, provide affordable prescription drugs to our citizens, and that would solve a lot of problems. But again, you have big money that is holding that back.
Our next question, the internet has become a vital resource for conducting business and a critical part of our everyday lives. With the new net neutrality rules by the FCC, describe your position on net neutrality and what exactly you plan to do as a member of Congress to preserve the internet as we now know it.
Yeah, I think there's a new bill that's been introduced to re-implement the net neutrality laws to protect us. But I'm a software engineer by trade. I make my livelihood through the internet. I work with engineers across the country. I think it's invaluable for us to provide access that is uncensored and unmetered and make that available to all people. That affects our education of our young adults. You have all the way from early learning to when you're just building your career and trying to learn new technologies. And so I think it's very important for us to protect that for our citizens.
Thanks. Justin?
The reason we have this issue, rules that govern these utilities were written in the 1930s. Then they were updated in 1996. They haven't been updated since. That's over a decade before the first iPhone ever came out. All we have to do is update the rules. Congress is the app market, and they need to send us an update. They won't, because congressmen like Garrett Graves has a lot of cable companies and telecom companies that are donating to him in massive amounts. This is why the man's been silent on net neutrality issues and hasn't proposed or hasn't got behind anything. He won't. He'll never will. As long as you look at the FEC report, and as long as who's paying his campaign contributions, his owners, the people who pay everything for him, he'll never touch the subject. I propose that day one of the most important things of the internet, I'd be in there and I will advocate and push for the update to the rules.
I think I know the answer to this. If I have to ask the same question I asked the candidates in the previous forum, but just for clarification, do both of you or either of you support the notion that the internet should be considered a public utility?
As opposed to being privately regulated through the various internet
For example,
providers.
Lafayette provides fiber to the home as a public utility.
Yeah, do you want him to answer?
Public
Either
utility.
one.
I'd rather it be a public utility.
Okay.
Yeah, I would think that it needs to be a public utility, just like our electric, water, those types of things. And also, I think just like our public libraries, there needs to be, even additional to our public libraries, accessible internet. This becomes a problem in our rural areas, and so we definitely need to bridge that gap.
Excellent.
All right. Our democracy is based on representation, where the people choose who represents us, not the politicians choosing who they want to represent. What we're referring to is gerrymandering. How do you think the government should address the issue of gerrymandering districts to ensure fair representation before the vital 2020 elections, before the next census, and after?
I support, there's legislation in Congress right now, and I support it. It is to change the rules, change the way they redistrict maps where it's proportionalized districts. Some states you get 2 districts with proportional representation. So if 70% of a district is Republicans, then you would have 2/3 of a district is Republicans, you'd have 2 representatives and 1 Democrat. It would be proportional. I support it, and if it failed and I get into Congress, I'm going to propose it again, similar legislation. And it's pretty simple there. Gerrymandering, you shouldn't get to pick your voters, they need to pick you. This district's one of the most gerrymandered ones in the state, and it's an atrocity that the same people who represent it, that these districts are drawn like this, and if you look at the borders, why they are drawn that way, it's very evident of why Republicans and why they've drawn them that way. And Democrats do it on East Coast states as well. It's a bipartisan agreement that they will abuse the system and corrupt it if they are allowed to. So you have to take that ability away from them.
Yeah, gerrymandering obviously is a problem. I think we definitely need to rely on our courts to do what's right and uphold our Constitution. I'm very proud to say I'm friends with one of the lawyers that filed the lawsuit here in Louisiana. She's from my hometown, and so I think that that is awesome that they got the ball rolling. It's long overdue here in Louisiana. As far as getting legislation passed, we need standardization. In my industry, in the software industry, that's exactly what we do. When we have a problem that we need to solve, and even when it comes to cybersecurity, or we standardize it. And I think that we need some standardization for states in drawing their maps.
I'm going to ask a follow-up that I did not ask in the last forum, but curious, we have your candidates here, but would either one of you support a ranked choice system of voting where you rank candidates 1 through however many, I don't know how many candidates are in your race, there's multiple Democrats obviously. Some states are experimenting with this right now. Just curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I think it's an interesting concept. I would want to study the policy more closely before I say, yeah, I'm on board with that. But you know, it does seem like a very logical approach, because when you vote, you want the next likely person
right.
to be there.
I'm open to the experiment of it and implementing it and trying it, because the corrupted system we have right now, I'd rather take an experiment over this. I would not stay with this status quo. That sounds like a better option than this corrupted system.
All right. Well, speaking of corrupt, the resignation of Scott Pruitt is head of the EPA, and with the interim head of the Environmental Protection Agency being a coal lobbyist, what do you envision as the role of the EPA in protecting the environment and and in regulating business?
Obviously, it's Environmental Protection Agency, so we need to understand their role is to protect our climate and protect our environment, our lands, and make sure that we have clean water, clean air. I think it is a conflict of interest that Pruitt was even in the position. You know, to have a lobbyist whose job is to make money profiting off of something that causes our problems and our environment is just a complete conflict of interest. I think that it's important for us to acknowledge that global warming, climate change is real, and to address these issues, especially here in Louisiana, where our land, our environment is so much of our culture and our livelihood. Our fishing industry, our farming industries are impacted by climate change, along with our coastal issues and our flooding issues.
The EPA was created to protect us from any entity, corporation, person, whatever, from polluting and destroying our environment and affecting us all. Congress has oversight authority. They have authority over the EPA. Congress is supposed to make sure the EPA is doing their job. They've taken a back seat and let them just not enforce anything, because why? Yet again, the root of all evil in our political system is the money that is corrupting it. And sellouts like Graves and the rest of our congressional delegation on the GOP side, they are just happy with the EPA just sitting back while companies can pollute and there's no enforcement of the rules. If I've elected to Congress, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to not only propose every time there's an issue with the EPA not doing what they're supposed to do, I will be very vocal on the EPA. You're not going to get away with polluting. You deserve better than that.
Let me ask a follow-up, which I asked in the last candidate forum. Do either of you feel that nature, our natural resources, should have a right to exist as sovereign, if you will, just like corporations have sovereign rights? In other words, should we consider our natural resources to be property, or should our natural resources be protected by all of us because they are part of all of us, not belong to, but part of all of us?
Are you referring to them being more public?
I'm talking about rights of nature versus corporate rights.
I would say that the rights of nature speak for themselves. Like humans have the right to exist, animals have the right to exist. I personally like to fish and hunt in the state of Louisiana, and that's part of nature. Animals eat animals. If companies keep destroying our environment like they have and polluting and making our coastal erosion problem worse like they've done with digging these canals that they don't want to pay to repair, we're not going to have any sportsman's paradise. If you want to hunt and fish, you should be the biggest nature-friendly person there is. I want more deer. I want more turkey. I want every animal to exist and thrive and prosper, because not only are they beautiful and they have the right to exist, they are delicious as well.
Whoa.
Just another kind of quick follow-up on the same thing, particularly in Louisiana with our oil and gas industry. And again, as both of you have kind of referred to, our problems with coastal erosion in this state. As far as the coastal erosion in Louisiana and repairing it or trying to stop it, should that responsibility fall on the federal government, on the state government? Should it fall on the corporations that have done it? Or practically right now, what is the best way that you feel to address that?
I would address your question as well. I think we have a moral responsibility to protect our earth, to protect the animals within it, including humanity, and to preserve that for future generations. So I would absolutely agree with that. As far as your question, I think that there needs to be a balance between both. You know, when you look at the BP oil spill, you know, that is something that was man-caused by corporation. They have liability. They are responsible for this. And then when you also have industries like oil and gas industries coming in, digging pipelines, decades ago, we're talking 50, 60 years ago, now even having impact, sinkholes, and even the impact they have on our environment, they have a responsibility, a liability to pay for those things. That shouldn't fall on the taxpayer dollars when somebody profited billions of dollars on an industry. As far as natural climate change that is not man-made, I think there is some part that we will need to, like hurricanes, things like that. We have a responsibility as taxpayers to help not only our state, other states that experience that as well.
First of all, it's a failing on the state of Louisiana back when Bobby Jindal was our governor and Garrett Graves was shielded those companies who dug these. There was lawsuits against the companies who dug these canals that cause our saltwater intrusion even more. That Garrett shielded them. Garrett was an excuse for a servant of the people. And when he was at the CPRA, Garrett, wasteful money on useless things like sand berms out in the Gulf in order to deflect oil. Useless. How do you stop? How do you hold these people responsible for it? It's easy. Pass legislation that treats pollution, this as a pollution, and the EPA can regulate it and enforce penalties. Treat the canals, the saltwater intrusion. The saltwater is a pollutant in our bayous and our marshes. So we have a pollution problem. Pass legislation to treat it like that, and the EPA can enforce that. These are contracts these companies signed to fill in these canals, and they didn't do it. They broke their contracts. It's about time to pay the piper. You don't come in my front yard and do four-wheeler dirt, kick up the little dirt tracks in my front yard, leave, and it rains and it fills up in water and turns into a lake, and then you get to sell me, no, I'm not paying for it. No, pay the piper.
Can I add something
Sure,
to that?
sure.
I'll make it quick. I think the other thing, too, is we need to stop undermining the agencies that are meant to protect that. One of the things that happened even in this state is, even this happened under Jindal, and again with Graves, is they've put PR people, they've fired scientists and people that have the know-how to, and that are experienced to address these issues, and they hire PR reps and the issues, and just like with the issue with the EPA, we need independent scientists that are out there working to solve these problems. That is outside of government and political influence.
And Mr. DeWitt, for the sake of equal time, if you have a response.
For the record, I don't support any regulation on the oil, gas, or any company that pollutes, like a self-regulating body. I don't support that. I only support government oversight because everybody can be corrupted. Look at our government, but we need a collective amount of people representing it, maybe interstate representing to enforce this. I don't ever want the chemical companies to regulate themselves. I don't want a guy who, I don't want the trash industry regulating itself. No one should regulate itself. No private partnerships on that regulation.
All right, let's go on to another topic. Betsy DeVos has shown little regard for American students and teachers. She has gone from stripping students' rights to not supporting teachers in the classroom. What would you do to ensure that America's education system truly allows every student to succeed?
First of all, that would be an understatement of Betsy DeVos's qualities in her job. First of all, state controls a lot of power when it comes to education. Congress appropriates funds to it. As a congressman, I would propose and would support every piece of legislation that improved our school systems by improving funding, by improving the way that the schools are structured, the way that the standards that they have to abide by, as well as I was a kid. I went to school. I had issues in school with my with learning. I had a learning disability. I still have to this day. And if it wasn't for some teachers that stood up for me and protected and helped me learn, I moved around a lot when I was growing up. My dad worked for an oil pipeline company, and moving around, I moved from the state back to Louisiana. They didn't recognize my academic credits, and I had to repeat all my academic classes. In the 10th grade, I had to do my 9th and 10th, and so on and so on. I graduated on time because of the teachers that stood up for me. We need to support our teachers more than anything.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is the defunding of our public schools. It needs to be addressed. The GOP, Republicans want to privatize everything, including our education system. I think that's the intent that Betsy DeVos has. And I think that it is important for Democrats to stand up and say no. I'm a product of public schools. I have 3 children that are currently in public schools and a 4th one that'll be there eventually. So I am definitely an advocate of supporting our public schools. I think early education is important for us to have funding and support. And T1 funding is important for us to support lower income communities and making sure that we get public education in those areas. Also support programs like TRIO. We have Democrats to thank that not only did we not lose that, but we gained funding because they fought for that. And I will continue to fight for that as well.
Thank you. We're going to move on to some local and state issues. Not that we haven't already been covering Louisiana issues, but I think, Mike, you have the lead-off question in this section.
With the failures of the Veterans Administration, the increase in homeless veterans, and the increase in the suicide rate for veterans, how do you envision the VA providing adequate and expedient services to those who sacrifice for this country?
I would say we need to fund them. This is another thing that we as Americans have a moral obligation to. Our men and women that go off and serve our country, put their lives on the line for our freedom, shouldn't even be a question for us whether we need to support this or not. It is just something that we need to support and figure out how to resolve the issue. So I definitely support funding for us to let the VA do their job, and we need to listen to what they need to give adequate health care, job training, and even rehabilitate veterans who are in combat that suffer from post-traumatic stress. I think it's important for us to make that a priority.
Can I just point out real quick that this is actually, Sue pointed out, this is actually not a Louisiana question, so don't feel like you have to answer it in a Louisiana context. It is a national question.
First of all, we all know how our veterans have been treated in the past and how it's un-American and it's despicable. First of all, currently we treat the U.S. military's budget like a blank check. Why are we doing that with our veterans? Show you actually are patriotic Americans. GOP has no concern about that. Some of our other elected congressmen or congresspeople have no concern for that. Let's treat the veterans' budget like the military. We got money for bombs. We got money to heal people. These people fought for this country, and I would support, obviously, the funding as well, but also I would start treating the Veterans Administration like the military. We have how many military bases? Why don't we have even more access locations for the veterans? Why do we have to go miles and miles around? My grandfather served in the U.S. Air Force, so did my dad. My grandfather had to retire and wanted to go into a VA health facility. He had to move to Biloxi. Why? From Lake Charles, Louisiana to Biloxi. That's not American.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, here's a tough one. Women in Louisiana earn 67 cents on the dollar compared to men. For women of color, it's 49 cents. With our legislature's inability to pass equal pay legislation, what would you do on the federal level to ensure that Louisiana women get equal pay for equal work?
Well, as a single mother that put myself through college being told that I couldn't do it because I was a woman and that I was a mother of 3, that it would be impossible. I did it anyway. I also went into a male-dominant industry. I'm a software engineer. I know what it's like to be paid thousands of dollars less than my male counterpart and equivalent to the men that I oversee in a team. So I, as a woman, have experienced this issue, and it's a problem. It is an evident problem. We have data that supports this. I definitely support legislation in Congress to address this. The Fair Pay Act of 2017 is something that I think that we need to use to fix this. And I think we also need to address this with the minimum wage as well.
I support the legislation proposed by Congresswoman Norton, I believe. I had to check that one. I couldn't remember her name. Basically, the equal pay issue is because of a few contributing factors. Sometimes companies unknowingly pay differences in pay. Sometimes it's malicious. And then other times it's just downright evil. I support legislation that would take that and make companies have to report all their employees' pay to the agency, to the federal government. And then if there's something suspicious, someone's getting paid less for the same job, it's on the company to prove why that's happening. Why is that discrimination happening? As well as majority of the equal pay gap comes from women in the workforce. When a woman becomes pregnant, she leaves the workforce temporarily in order to go home and start the family and then come back. Many women transition back into the workforce. We need family and medical pay leave for women, men. Both need to take, there's responsibility, and they both want to be involved in that, and we need to make it possible by passing legislation for family and medical paid leave.
Follow-up question, because this came up during the last forum that we held. Where do you stand on the Equal Rights Amendment? Should it go ahead and be revived, and the votes yes that have been made by the legislatures, because it's one vote away, one state away, should that be allowed to try another 10 years to get, or 5 years to get it to happen?
I absolutely do believe that, we need that opportunity. It is, to me, it's a sadness to know that a simple amendment to simply give women the constitutional right to be equal to men in this country has taken so many years and still is yet to be passed. It's like the man that says, we don't need to get married because we're practically married. That's exactly what it is. And women deserve a commitment from America to be treated and on paper said that we are equal. And it's past time for this to happen. And it needs to happen, yesterday.
I as well support it. Also, you're not going to get it from you're not going to get any progress on this subject and many others due to your congressmen and people in Congress right now. They don't want to. Their corporate backers don't want to pay you more. If you vote GOP this year, you're voting pretty much to keep the status quo. And they're very ineffective at changing anything because they can't even tear apart the Affordable Care Act like they said for years. Vote for something else besides these sellouts, and this is going to get done.
I have a question that's not on our script.
Sure.
Oh.
But, I'm wondering, both of you, if elected, would represent the city of Baton Rouge, part of the city of Baton Rouge. And Baton Rouge is a very diverse, racially diverse community, as is the state of Louisiana. But it's also fraught with racial tensions, as is the state of Louisiana. I'm wondering how you each see how to bridge the racial divide in the state of Louisiana, and particularly in the city of Baton Rouge. We had the Alton Sterling killing of Alton Sterling a couple of years ago that really brought this to the forefront. So how would you address the issue of racial tension and racial division in the state of Louisiana, particularly in the city of Baton Rouge? You can start now.
I wouldn't put up with it, with racism, I mean. As a openly gay man in this city in the South, I'm a Caucasian, and I'm in rooms, and I get to hear what some people say behind closed doors, and they say it just because I'm white, that I'm part of the good old boy system. I've heard it. It's disgusting, and I don't stay quiet about it. I call them out constantly. I've called coworkers out. I've called friends out. I don't tolerate it. Also, people who have been stepped on in racial tension, but people have been stepped on throughout their lives. I'm a gay guy, you know. Some people don't still know that we can't give blood. I mean, I have to get yelled. Words are yelled at me. I can't say that on here. Down the street, my husband's been hazed. I've been hazed. I mean, I know what it's like to look over your shoulder and constantly have to worry about someone coming after you. And I don't see how anyone wants to live in that manner. And I understand the frustration, as well as such things as our police departments. I support police officers, but also it's time to stop backing them all the time universally. When you've got a bad apple, throw it out. Stop acting like you have to come to the defense. If there's a problem, solve it. Example, Sheriff Kaz, you didn't even report something. Why? Negligence or favoritism?
Yeah, that's an issue that's dear to my heart. You know, after Alton Sterling, I've always been an advocate for social justice as well, but after Alton Sterling, you know, to be a wife of a police officer and to be out fighting for social justice in this aspect, it's a difficult place to be in because you see the perspective from so many different angles and so many different eyes. But I think what's most important is for us to stop being offended by facts, by data. You know, data is what shows us discrepancies, racial discrepancies, sexual discrepancies, gender discrepancies. And I think we just need to stop being offended by the data and just look at the facts and fix the problems. It's that simple. And I think that we need people that are leaders that are going to bring us together and not divide us. And I think ultimately people in power, they want to throw gasoline on that division, because as long as we are a people that are blaming one another, pointing the finger, and hating each other, then we're divided and we're powerless.
And I think you have the next question?
Yeah. With Governor Edwards expanding Medicaid in the state, we brought 19,000 new jobs and over $1.5 billion in direct economic impact to the state. Do you support Medicaid expansion? And if so, how would you protect it on the federal level?
Yeah, I absolutely support Medicaid expansion. As you said, it completely helps our state. I think what's important is not to allow the repeal of the ACA to happen. You know, that is what is protecting our Medicaid expansion. So it's simply making sure that you don't get the ACA repealed. Now, we can enhance it and fix the problems with the ACA, but I think Medicaid expansion needs to stay in place.
I say we need to repair the problems with the ACA, but also we need to stop letting the GOP tear it apart and intentionally sabotage it and make it more expensive. I recently went to the doctor a few weeks ago, and some things that were covered last year wasn't covered this year. Why? I wonder why. How do you gripe about something for over years and years and years when you had a previous president? Then you get control of the House, the Senate, the President, and arguably the Supreme Court, and you can't get anything done. I mean, I don't want you to get anything done because you're counterproductive, but the GOP can't even get that done. But they just assault it and tear out things in order to make it worse on us, to aggravate us so that we get angry and they have something else to run on. We need to move towards the Medicare buy-in system. We need to move towards Medicare for all instead of just this archaic form. What happens if you lose your job? You don't have insurance. You have to go on Medicare. Better system.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Louisiana is unique because we are on the convergence or the divergence of energy production and the environment. How would you protect both the environment and ensure Louisiana remains a dominant force in energy production?
That assumes, by the way, that you think we should remain a dominant force in energy production.
Well,
We
there's
should.
other forms of energy.
We
too.
got a
Sorry.
lot of, you're fine. We got a lot of forms of energy in Louisiana: wind, solar, hydro. Not just that, oil. First of all, you diversify. We need to diversify our economy. Louisiana's economy is dangerously dependent on oil companies. It's time to diversify like you do with your stocks or your 401k markets. You know, you don't just put it all in one basket. What happens? You know what happens. We need to diversify our energy because also that's independence. That's a national security issue right there. You talk about current administration talks about China getting ahead of us, and I'm sorry, he mispronounces it, but China is working us over, and we're not getting a good deal. China's got the right idea with the green energy. They see the line in the sand. Even companies who are producing the oil, like Saudi Arabia, are diversifying their economy because they know the day is coming. There's an end to the life after oil. They know it's coming. They're diversifying. I won't take a backseat to Saudi Arabia and China.
Well, I think there's a common misconception that by allowing us to start investing in renewable energy, that would actually immediately hurt the oil and gas industry. That's just not true. We have to stop, putting that fear out there, because it scares people. It scares people that they might lose their jobs, but no, that's not going to happen. Even places like BP, they are starting to strategize to come up with renewable energy strategies. One of the things that I would like to do is to fight for us to have subsidies for small municipalities to start investing, just like Abita Springs, and becoming clean energy champions, and having renewable energy implemented in their local municipalities, plugged into their power grids. What this would do for these smaller municipalities even is it would reduce the cost of living for energy costs. It would also pay for itself, even if we had like a 50-50% match where they had to come up with their portion to get it implemented. I think it's a smart strategy for us to start small and grow big.
Just as a quick follow-up, I think particularly in Louisiana, because we've had so much oil and gas, that a lot of the people in Louisiana feel that we have to make a choice between a clean environment or jobs. You either help out the economy or you help out the environment. I think we all realize that's probably a false choice, but how do we get the people in Louisiana to understand, or how do we get the leaders in Louisiana to understand and move beyond that?
Vote them out.
I think a lot of it, well, there's a lot of money. A lot of money goes into politics, and they have a lot of propaganda, a lot of fear tactics that they use. But, we still have cars. We still have a lot of means for oil and gas companies. Don't get me wrong. Eventually, we want to progress, but a big start small for us to evolve and stay to be those champions. Again, is to start small. Start with renewable energy, implementing at a local level. It's going to benefit the people. It's going to pay for itself. It's going to create jobs, and we move forward. We progress. We don't have to do this overnight.
Starting small and local and things like that was for 1995. Climate change is not anything we have time to continue to kick the can down the road and keep waiting. Climate change has been evident since the late 1970s, when we discovered lead in gasoline as a bad pollutant and it harms us. Oh yeah, number one, it's no more time to waste. I don't want to sit here and tell you that we're going to take small incentives. I want guarantees. I'm tired of waiting. There's no reason to wait, except for your sellout politicians want to wait because that's what's the best thing, to kick it down the bucket. They take oil money and they will give you this ridiculous thing about we don't need to change it overnight. That is such BS. You can do it. They just don't want to. They're the problem. Vote them out, and don't vote for someone who will dare over your best interest. They care about the company's best interest over yours. Number one, fastest growing job and good paid job in this country, windmill tech. You want a job? Windmill tech. Better than getting oil all over you.
I think we have a couple of more questions.
Yeah.
And if it's all right, I kind of want to flip the order, because
Sure.
I want Sue to ask the question that's about sort of Baton Rouge.
That's fine.
And maybe, I guess we can do that now? Or
The number
last
6?
question,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. One of the most common grievances with metro areas in the state, in particular Baton Rouge, we hear it from Lake Charles, we hear it from New Orleans, is that there's traffic and the infrastructure is dilapidated. This is not uncommon across the country. What would you do as a congressperson to craft a nationwide infrastructure plan that will both rebuild America's workforce and help us bring our infrastructure into the current century?
And can I add a third part?
Sure.
And specifically, what can you do in Baton Rouge as a congressperson to help build the infrastructure here? Because this is perhaps the worst city in the state of Louisiana as far as traffic is concerned. So I don't know who we're starting with, but
Like me go?
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Go ahead.
My specialty anyway. No offense to anybody. As I work I'm a party chief at a survey company, and we do a little thing called surveying. We go around the state. We're on the forefront. We're the first people on a construction site. We're the last people on a construction site. And as I've worked all across this state, name a highway, I'll tell you where a good place for boudin's at. Worked everywhere. Flood structures in New Orleans. What you can do is first, as congressman, I will propose legislation to repeal the tax giveaway and propose a real $1 trillion infrastructure package, unlike the administration's joke of a proposal, because typically the federal government foots 80% of the bill, and the states and municipalities, they book 20% of the bill. The administration's proposal was opposite. They foot 20, you foot 80, because they want your legislatures to raise money on the taxes on you, because they can't get it done, so they kick it to the state. Typical GOP tactic there. Want to get it done? Infrastructure includes internet, that's infrastructure. Water pipes for drinking, that's infrastructure. And how do you fix the problem in the Baton Rouge area? You don't just keep widening roads, you invest in alternative transportation. Imagine how better New Orleans and Baton Rouge could be with a train that can get you both. People would stay in Baton Rouge at hotels and take the train down to New Orleans for events. Not just building highways ain't the answer. You start building a bridge today, it'll be 10 years before it's done. The stuff we're doing now, by the time it's finished, it's outdated already.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a two-port system. Number one, I definitely think that we need to invest in infrastructure. And one thing people have to understand, like, how do you pay for it? It pays for itself, too, and also creates jobs. It also brings in business. It grows our economy, plain and simple. So I think we need to get over the fear of, like, the cost, because it's going to pay for itself. Secondly, I think we need a strategy for reducing traffic. And one of the things is, I work for a company out of Chicago. I work with software engineers across the country. There are tons of jobs that we can encourage people to work remotely. They're everywhere. I think that we need to give incentives to companies and employees who have this the ability to do that. I think that there should be some tax incentives to that. And I also think that by implementing that, we're also helping our environment. We're reducing our carbon footprint. So I think it really needs to be a two-part strategy in that aspect.
I have a rebuttal on
Sure,
something?
yeah.
The jobs issue, as a person who worked for a company, I won't name it, but it's one of Garrett Graves' largest donors, worked for that company for 5 years on flood walls in New Orleans and flood structures after Hurricane Katrina. And if you want to hire local and hire jobs, stop taking these companies as, we want to improve jobs. Yeah, they'll sell your job out in a heartbeat. I've seen it firsthand. They claim all these great numbers. Simple fact, they will cut wherever they can. And if you don't believe me, go get a job for them. I watch them hire people that shouldn't be able to hire, because there's checks and balances to make sure people can get into, I know I won't cut corners. There's undocumented workers that did work in New Orleans in that area that had Social Security numbers, and these companies say they want jobs. Like Exxon will tell you they create jobs by stimulating the economy. They're lying. They hire the undocumented workers, the same people that they say is the problem, the GOP. They'll hire them, they put their Social Security number in E-Verify, and when it comes back a good social, they don't care. How do they know they're undocumented? Because they're the last job, he had a different Social Security number, and he comes to this one. And it's the same guy working for the same supervisor, but yet the company didn't care. I don't want to give a company an incentive. I want to guarantee you hire local within state, you hire people from the area to do the work. Stop using excuses.
Say something. You have a
You have
response, or?
Yeah, I think that that kind of addresses immigration and an aspect, which is a little bit of a change of topic, but I can agree that we need to have stronger penalties on companies for hiring people that are here illegally. You know, I think that is part of the problem. I've worked for software development companies in which do payroll systems, and I can tell you that there are Social Security numbers that are reused over and over again within companies, and that is a problem. And I think there are multiple ways, even using technology and establishing means of accountability to prevent that.
I think that we are almost running perfectly on time.
Oh, that's awesome.
So we have one more question and then closing remarks.
Sure. Louisiana does not have a state minimum wage. The cost of living across the state varies from New Orleans to Lake Charles, from Shreveport to Slidell. What do you think is a fair livable wage in Louisiana? And what would you do on the federal level to ensure that Louisiana residents get that long-awaited raise?
Can I add on the first part?
Sure.
Can you name a number too? When you say what is a livable, what's a fair livable wage? I'd like to hear an actual dollar amount.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I can tell you again. You know, when I was 24 years old, I was 2 months pregnant with my third. My husband walked out on me at the time, and I barely made over minimum wage. You know, and I could not survive with my children. And I think that, again, that is an issue that is very, very dear to me. People deserve to have a job and get paid a living wage. Minimum wage absolutely needs to keep up with the price of inflation. If it kept up with the price of inflation as of today, it would be $12.50 an hour. That's where we would be at. And I think that we also need to account for the future as well. So we need to have a system that is set up that we have a natural raise that occurs with our minimum wage system that allows for inflation. I think there needs to be an algorithm that gets to put in and a bill that says, hey, look, this is the plan, or this is the calculation to how this is determined. I also think that we need to invest in education as well. I think that it's important to have debt-free and even public colleges for people to have training so that they have the ability to raise themselves up and have opportunity to even make above and beyond that minimum limit.
Thank you.
First of all, I do agree that we need to tie the minimum wage to inflation. You do your research very well. I see. I got the same numbers as well. We tied it to 1960s. It would be around that. That's correct. But there's also another problem. We have a huge rampant issue in this country with GOP or elected politicians typically shielding these giant corporate welfare industries like Walmart, like your retailers that pay minimum wage, the current minimum wage, get away with paying an unlivable wage. And guess what? We foot the bill because our taxes have to pay for the safety net programs in order to help these people have a decent life because they're getting screwed by a company. In the corporate welfare system, raise the minimum wage, and we have less people using the safety net programs. No incentives, no tax breaks, raise it, and that is the end of the story. Raise it, we have less people lifted out of poverty. You shouldn't work 40 hours a week, come home and decide, should I pay the power bill or should I pay the car insurance? That's a joke. That's not American.
I have a follow-up question. The state of Louisiana has legislation that says local municipalities don't have the right to set their own minimum wage. It's called state preemption. Should local municipalities have the right to say, in this community, a living wage is this and this is what you must pay?
We just saw this in Seattle, right?
Right.
Seattle did
It's happened in Seattle. It's happened in a number of places.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I think within a small governing body like that, I think that is a little bit of overreach. I mean, it's one thing if they want to go under the limit. But if they say, look, in our city and our cost of living, and they're using an algorithm to calculate the means of the minimum wage to live in that area, then by all means, honestly, that's a better solution because the cost of living varies so much across the state, across the nation. And so we need to take those things in consideration.
I agree, and I'd like to speak English, and I'm not going to be like Garrett and tell you political terms. It costs more in New Orleans to live than it does in Baton Rouge. Fact, it costs more to live in Los Angeles than it does in Baton Rouge. I support municipalities raising the minimum wage in their area as high as they deem necessary, but you better not ever try to go below the living wage.
Okay.
That's not acceptable.
I think that concludes our question and answer portion. I really want to thank the Louisiana Democratic Party and Andy Saison and Justin DeWitt. It's really an informative conversation and I think voters have two really great choices in this race. So wish you both the best of luck. I think that Justin, you go first. Is that right? And then Annie will conclude.
I hope today that I've demonstrated that I'm an average Louisianian sitting here talking to you and seeing where I stand on things. And I hope I've energized. I hope you're ready for November in order to vote out these sellouts. You know, when I don't do my job right, I get fired. It's time to fire Congress. It's time to fire a majority of these representatives that don't represent anything but the people who put money in their campaigns. I'm sick of it. I'm not running because I had an epiphany and I want to, you know, I want to stand up for people. But that's not I'm not going to give you that political garbage that they tell you. I had an epiphany. I want to stand up for this and that. No, I'm angry. If you're angry, you can join. I want to recruit you to join this campaign. We're going through to November. It's going to be a long, and it's going to get dirty, I'm sure, because Garrett Graves is a very dirty politician. So I'm looking forward to calling him out on his lies, his misrepresentations, and it's pretty much time to clean house with Congress. If you want to check us out, you can at DeWittForCongress.com, Justin DeWitt for U.S. Congress on Facebook, and DeWitt4 Congress for Twitter. And thank you for tuning in, and I hope to talk to you again.
Yeah, I'm Andy Saison. Again, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm a software engineer. I love what I do for a living as a software engineer. I work very hard for my career. So I'm absolutely not doing this because I need or want a career. I'm doing this because I look back at the woman I was 15 years ago, that single mother, raising 3 children, trying to survive. And I'm concerned about that woman. I don't think that I have the same opportunities, and the odds have increased against me and many other Americans. We don't have representation here in this district and much of the state of Louisiana. And I want to fight for the people, the voices that are not being heard, and the people that are not being represented here in this district. But I alone can't do this. It's going to take you as well at home, wanting that change, wanting it as bad as I do, to sacrifice family time, you know, that bubble that we live in. You know, I work from home, and again, I could stay there and live in a bubble and be unaffected by all the things that I see around me, from the issues at the border that we're seeing, the social justice that we're seeing not being taking place, the racial divide, the division between families, the lack of taking care of our seniors, our veterans. These issues are not being addressed, and they affect us directly. And I want to fight to be that voice for us. You can find out more about me on my website. It's voteandy.com. Andy spelled A-N-D-I-E. You can find me on Twitter at Andy Saison, and on Facebook and Instagram. And I hope to hear from you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. And one more plug. I didn't do this last time, but Sue Lincoln will be covering the congressional midterms for the Bayou Brief, and you can check out her coverage at bayoubrief.com. Thank you to the Louisiana Democratic Party again, to Executive Director Stephen Handwork, and for everybody here. We're going to sign off. So good luck.
Thank you.
Take care.
Great. Good job.